Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the second event of the NASW New York City Spring 2023 Senior Series, Meeting the Needs of People Living with Alzheimer's and Other Dementias. This Spring Senior Series is in collaboration with CaringKind, the heart of Alzheimer's caregiving. I'll introduce you to Erica P. Sandoval in just a moment, who does some work with them. Just a few items before we begin. My name is Angelique Imani Rodriguez. I'm the manager of community engagement and volunteer initiatives here at the NASW New York City chapter. I coordinate, organize, and facilitate a lot of the free community engagement events like the Senior Series and more here at the chapter. Post-event, an email will be sent to all attendees with how to get involved with the chapter, membership info, any information from our presenters, including the recording and the PDF they have sent my way to share with you. We hope that when registering, you opted to join the NASW New York City email list, which gives you access to all of our updates, news, and upcoming opportunities. So what is coming up at the chapter? First up, we have Currents, the biannual chapter newsletter, which is reopened for submissions. And yes, we do accept submissions from students. The deadline for submissions for our newsletter is May 12th, so make sure you submit your work if you're interested. Additionally, applications for our student liaison program, the NASW New York City Cares Member Ambassador Program, as well as our NASW New York City Cares Mentors Program reopens for the next round in May. Additionally, registration for the NASW New York City Virtual CE Conference is still open. You can earn up to 9 CE contact hours during our 2-day virtual conference. If you don't need the CE contact hours, but still want to engage with the conference, the chapter is currently still seeking volunteers to support the event, with opportunities to engage with leading social work professionals and get highlighted in our spring-summer issue of Currents. If your organization or school is interested, we also do offer sponsorship opportunities as well as discounted group registration rates. Lastly, save the date for the NASW New York City Cares Virtual Social Work Job Fair on Wednesday, July 19th, and the Empower Your Practice series being coordinated in collaboration with the co-chairs of the NASW New York City Psychotherapy and Wellness Practitioners Group, happening at the start of August. So I know that was a lot of information I just threw at everyone, but as I mentioned before, all of this information about how you can get involved and engage with the NASW New York City chapter will be included in your post-event email, along with everything shared during today's event from our presenters. Expect that email to be sent later this week, so keep your eyes open. If you have any questions regarding community engagement events at the NASW New York City chapter, I'll drop my email address in the chat for you shortly. Thank you for your patience as I run through the opening remarks. Once again, thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to hand over the mic to Erica P. Sandoval, former president of the NASW New York City chapter, and who's also working with CaringKind. Erica, whenever you're ready.
Hello, everyone. So we have a wonderful, wonderful presentation today from CaringKind. And we have Susan here is going to share the information. But before we do that, I want to just talk about how can we as social workers break barriers to reach communities of color with these resources. We know that it's really difficult for our communities to really accept resources, even acknowledge that they may need support, known as apoyo. And so what we must do is really be the bridge. We must provide access to resources and be the bridge. So I'm really proud to say that I have been working with CaringKind as a spokesperson. I'm the CEO and founder of Latinx in Social Work, Latinx, Latina in Social Work, which is an incredible collective of amazing social workers throughout New York State and beyond. And we share personal stories of trauma and resilience. And we really are the bridge for our communities. We want to make sure that our communities have everything that they need to not just survive, but to thrive. And also, as the past president of NASW New York City, it has also been an honor to serve our communities and social workers. So when CaringKind approached me to really make sure that we're able to get this incredible resource to our communities, it was a no-brainer. So I invite you to connect to mental health and all healthcare professionals, especially of color in our networks, with CaringKind services. because you as the referral source is key to bridging services to our communities. And we know that our communities may not always feel comfortable if the resource or the referral is not coming in the language that they're comfortable in receiving. So I invite you to connect with as many social workers that you feel can provide this information to the communities. We understand that we need more memory care providers to be people of color and linguistically diverse, especially in engagement positions. And we need to train all memory care providers to be culturally humble. And CaringKind does this. And you're going to hear from Marcia, who's going to share with you about this incredible program, MAPS. I also invite you to connect and earn the trust of not just people of color living with Alzheimer's, but also their family and caregivers by helping break the stigma of getting support, known as what I was mentioning, apoyo. To also have meaningful conversations and create space where you are the trusted bridge that brings these resources to your community. You as a social worker are the person that they look for, that they go to. And we have so much information and so much knowledge, and we can really create an amazing impact. And as mental health care and healthcare professionals and community healthcare professionals, we need to lay the groundwork of trust with people who are also young and middle-aged, so they trust us to work with their older family members in the near future. And if they need support with memory loss, they've already familiar with the mental health care and trusting providers that we are. It's so important to build that trust. We also need to continue breaking the stigma of receiving supportive mental health care, especially within our communities of color, and ensure they have access to the resources that will support their mental health and wellness. And thinking of creating Alzheimer's and dementia care programs was a no-brainer for CaringKind, who was formerly known as Alzheimer's organization. And the facilities are so culturally humble. They expand options for treating and living with Alzheimer's and dementias beyond the Western medicine, because they provide holistic ways of supporting the individual, the caretaker, and the family. And they also let patients access to the treatments that aligns with their culture. So by increasing cultural familiarity and the environment that surrounds all these patients, in order to reduce the patient's negative experience, that's the way we're going to reach more of our communities as we empower them to really receive the support that they need. We know that communities of color face disenfranchisement in so much of their lives, and especially medicine and access is one of the largest barriers. So therefore, effective Alzheimer's and dementia treatment should empower these patients and their families with options for care and moving forward instead of being prescriptive. This is why CaringKind is so important, as they are hitting all the marks and are here to connect with all of you today to reach our communities. So it's an honor to introduce the CaringKind team. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're very excited. And for those of you who are joining us again today, thank you so much for coming back. Today, we're going to talk about meeting the needs of people that are actually living with a diagnosis. And I want to say that the beginning of the presentation is the same as yesterday's for the first 15 to 20 minutes. It's an abbreviated version of our Understanding Dementia. So if you were here yesterday, please feel free to go and grab another cup of coffee or kick back a little bit. But the new content will start in about 15 to 20 minutes. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about that. So who is CaringKind? We were founded in 1978, so we have about 45 years of experience. We were founded in 1978 as the Alzheimer's Society, one of the nation's first charities focusing specifically on dementia. In 1985, we founded the New York City chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and then in 2015, when the Alzheimer's Association centralized, CaringKind decided to remain independent. Our mission is to create, deliver, and promote compassionate care and support services for individuals and families affected by Alzheimer's disease and any other dementia, and to eliminate the disease through the advancement of research. We also spend a lot of time trying to eliminate stigma and to advocate on behalf of people that are living with a diagnosis and their families, and to increase public awareness by collaborating with research centers, pharmacological companies, and by informing public policy. So that is a little bit about us. So who do we serve? We serve, so while we wait for a cure, the best thing we can do is to be caring and kind to those who are impacted. So we serve people who are living with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or any other form of dementia. We serve their family members, caregivers, partners, friends, anybody who provides care and support. We educate and support care staff in healthcare settings, in aging, senior settings, and dementia care professionals. And we also go out and provide education and support in residential community settings. So what is dementia specifically? So it is a general term that is used to describe any kind of long-term chronic changes in the brain. It is an umbrella term, just like we use an umbrella term for cancer. It usually refers to changes in memory, plus one other cognitive ability. For instance, short-term memory loss, problems handling money or paying bills, problems with word finding and language, and the symptoms have to be significant enough to impact a person's abilities in their activities of daily living and in their relationships. So what are some of the things that can affect memory, and why is it important to get tested? So not all conditions that affect our memory is a dementia. A lot of these conditions can be treated or cured or repaired. So depression, for instance, can lead to memory loss, sleep apnea, vitamin B12 deficiencies, vascular conditions, strokes, brain tumors, inflammation, Lyme disease, UTIs, delirium, reactions to medications, toxic exposures, and excessive alcohol consumption. So it's very important that if somebody has or shows signs of short-term memory loss, that, you know, to get tested for some of these other conditions that are indeed treatable. Just like we get our cholesterol tested and our sugar tested, we should also get our memory and cognition tested, especially as we grow older, because, you know, we want to create a baseline. If we were always bad at math, for instance, that should be noted. Or if we were always bad at spelling, that should be noted, so that is not mistaken for a warning sign of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So here are some of the warning signs that we should be on the lookout for: memory loss, difficulty performing familiar tasks, problems with word finding or language, getting lost in time or place, changes in judgment, organization, and planning, mood changes, and social withdrawal, and accidents that people maybe used to be really good drivers and never had an accident in their lives, and all of a sudden there's like a fender bender. Due to the fact that the cognitive impairment also can affect vision, or usually does affect vision. So if you experience any of this yourself, or if you see it in others, in your parents, in your patients, in your clients, you know, encourage them to get it checked out, because as we said before, it may very well be a treatable condition. Some statistics. Dementia is currently the 7th leading cause of death among all diseases worldwide. It is one of the major causes of disability and dependency among older adults. It has physical, psychological, social, and economic impacts, not just for the people that are living with dementia, but also for their caregivers, families, and society at large. It is the most common cause. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of all of the dementias, making up about 60 to 80% of all dementias. In 2022, over 6.5 million people are living with Alzheimer's disease. By 2050, we estimate over 14 million. 1 in 9 adults over 65 has a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, and the risk increases with age. And 1 in 3 older adults will die with Alzheimer's disease. And in the US, it is the 5th leading cause of death. For New York specifically, in 2020, there was 410,000 people living with Alzheimer's disease, and that is expected to increase to 460,000 by 2025. Those people, they have 586,000 informal caregivers. Caregivers that suffer from chronic health conditions themselves, that are depressed because of their new roles, and very often suffer from poor physical health themselves. Those caregivers, the care that they provide amounts to 774 million hours of unpaid care. So there's a lot of caregivers out there. We know they're struggling, and we try to provide as much support as possible to them. And that was what we talked about yesterday. So basically, who is at risk of developing a dementia? Well, if you have a brain, you're at risk. Some risk factors are not modifiable, such as age, family history, and genetics, and some are very modifiable. We talk a lot about dementia being a lifestyle disease. So doctors, neurologists recommend that we focus on lifestyle to decrease the risk of developing a dementia. We should exercise about 150 minutes or more a week. We should focus on eating a healthy diet at least 80% of the time, and the Mediterranean diet is right now the most highly recommended. We should stop smoking, we should limit drinking, and we should, there was a couple of studies that came out just a couple of weeks ago, really focus on like limiting inflammation in the body. And we just also recently learned that focusing on healthy hygiene to keep gum inflammation at bay will also decrease your risk of developing a dementia. So basically, what's good for your stomach is good for your brain. We should we should treat chronic conditions such as blood pressure. I'm sorry. Such as blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes. We should try to keep our BMIs under 30, and we should address any kind of like health conditions that we have. We should focus on our psychosocial engagement. We should try to stay connected, manage stress, engage with other people, and engage in cognitive stimulation. Brain games are showing more and more promise as the neuroplasticity of the healthy brain cells are shown to remain much healthier when we exercise our brain, just like when we exercise our bodies. So what is Alzheimer's disease specifically? Scientists believe that this buildup of plaques and tangles in the brain is what leads to Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So plaques are building up in between nerve cells. In Alzheimer's disease, the protein is called beta amyloid. In Lewy body, it is a different type of protein, but nevertheless, these proteins build up in the brain. These plaques build up in the brain. And tangles are twisted fibers of another protein called tau. And and tau causes tangles to form inside dying cells. And though most people develop some plaques and tangles as they age, those with Alzheimer's and other dementias, they tend to develop far more. The plaques and tangles form in a predictable pattern, beginning in areas important in learning and memory, and then spreading to other regions. And that's specifically for Alzheimer's disease, that the disease typically starts in the hippocampus area of the brain first. Scientists are not 100% sure what role plaques and tangles play, but most experts believe that they block communication among nerve cells and disrupt activities that cells need to survive. Different areas of the brain control different functions. So for instance, with the Alzheimer's disease, we know that the hippocampus is affected first, but with other dementias, it could be different areas of the brain. So for instance, if I said to you, go to the bathroom and brush your teeth, that command requires information to be communicated to at least 4 different parts of the brain. So in the parietal lobe, you'd think, she's telling me that she wants me to do something. And then the command is transferred to the temporal lobe, to the long-term memory of procedures. Do I know what it is that she wants me to do? Brush my teeth? Yes. Make a souffle? No. Then the command goes back to the cerebellum to physically walk to the bathroom. And then once in the bathroom, the information goes all the way back to the frontal lobe for tools, identification, and sequencing in order to perform the task correctly. So one little command like that really requires multiple areas of the brain to engage in order for us to effectively carry out the task. So depending on what area of the brain that is affected, this will also affect people's ability to actually complete the tasks. Some of the changes that are common when somebody has a dementia, we see changes in memory, in executive function, in visual spatial function, in language, in processing information, in muscle movement, and in sensory functions. So clinicians often define dementia based on the criteria given in the DMV-5. And the criteria for dementia is as follows. Symptoms must include a decline in memory and in at least one other cognitive domain, complex attention, executive function, learning, language, perceptual motor, or social cognition. The client must also be experiencing a steadily progressive, gradual decline in cognition. The decline in cognitive abilities must be severe enough to interfere with daily life. Symptoms must not be due to delirium, which is a sudden onset short-term cognitive change due to infection or other medical conditions. And it must not be better explained by another mental disorder like major depression or schizophrenia. We're going to talk a little bit about stages. These are all estimates. I mean, obviously it depends on when somebody receives a diagnosis. So for the early stage, we say that it lasts between 2 and 7 years, depending on the type of dementia. The moderate stage of Alzheimer's, 2 to 7 years, and late stage Alzheimer's, 1 to 3 years. So what's really important, and that's how we try to assist as much as we can, to realize that there are many, many good years to live after diagnosis, to live well, and to live with purpose. One way to determine stages is for somebody trained in dementia care, in occupational therapy, or another clinical area to observe and test using a variety of testing tools. For instance, we use the Global Deterioration Scale developed by Barry Reisberg. It has 7 stages, 1 being the normal and 7 being the end stage. There's also the cognitive rating scales, such as the MoCA and the SLUMS, that include cognitive assessments. There's the functional assessment staging test, the FAST, that was developed by Reisberg. It is designed to evaluate patients on the basis of caregiver report by observation of somebody's functional performance. So it's more an occupational therapy scale. Other staging scales include those developed by Claudia Allen, who was also an OT, and Allen's scale adapted to the GEM scale staging by Teepa Snow, who is also an OT. Let's see. So when somebody is advancing through the dementia diagnosis, we see some changes in executive function. Sometimes the early clues of brain change can be picked up due to damage in the front of the brain, and that's where the higher order of thinking is. So damage to the executive system often leads to difficulty organizing, difficulty in planning and inattention, inability to multitask, difficulty with verbal fluency, having trouble planning for the future, difficulty processing, storing, and/or retrieving information, mood swings, lack of concern for other people and/or animals, loss of interest in activities, socially inappropriate behavior, inability to learn from the consequences from past actions, difficulty with abstract concepts, the inability to make the leap from the symbolic to the real world, and unawareness or denial that the behavior is a problem. We also see changes in visual spatial abilities, the processing speed and reaction time, coordination, taste, smell, sensation, and balance and physical activities. So this guy is Richard Taylor, who is a PhD and who was diagnosed with a cognitive disability. And he really wants people to know that he is not a disease. He is a person who is living with a chronic cognitive disability. Richard was one of the earliest advocates in the US to speak out as an advocate actually living with dementia. He wrote a book called Alzheimer's from the Inside Out, and he has several inspiring talks that you can probably find if you Google it or look at the TED Talks. When Richard described his experience of living with dementia, he said, "I am not dying from a disease. I am living with a chronic cognitive disability." And this is a helpful description for us to consider. He was also very deliberate in referring to himself as a person living with symptoms and diagnosis of dementia, probably of the Alzheimer's type. But let me ask you, what makes you you, and what makes me me? If I was to ask you how you describe yourself or how your friends describe you, what would they say? You wouldn't say, "Hey, I'm the hypothyroid," or "Hey, I'm the total knee replacement," or "I'm the diabetic," or "I'm really good short-term memory," or "I'm the really good balancer." No, that's not who you are. That's not how we think of ourselves. We don't think of ourselves as our disease. But what makes me me? The aspects of my mind, the abilities of my body, and the experiences of my senses. But we are more than these things. There's more to us. Call it being or soul or spirit. And we need to remember that this is really the reality when we engage with people living with a dementia. Some age-related changes to memory and learning. As we age, we may find it difficult or more difficult to find words, more difficult to multitask, and we may see mild decreases in our ability to pay attention. But we can still learn new things, and we can still create new memories, and we can still improve vocabulary and language skills. Actually, our scientists believe that the more engaged we are, the more we use our brains, the more we learn new things to open up new pathways in our brains, the healthier our brains will be. Okay, and so today we are going to talk a little bit about our early stage programs that we provide for people that have received a diagnosis of a dementia or Alzheimer's. And I'm going to hand over the microphone to Pam.
And I'm going to try to remember to unmute myself. Woohoo! All right. So one of my tasks today was to explain a little bit about who are people living with dementia and what are their needs. So, and obviously to talk about some of our early stage programs that I help co-facilitate at CaringKind. So here is my Aunt Pat. She's actually my cousin, but my kids always called her Auntie P. And Pat was amazing. Pat was a realtor down in Dallas, and I mean, she sold Mark Cuban one of his homes. She had a table next to Troy Aikman at Javier's restaurant. And for those of you who aren't, Cowboys fans, you may not know who that is, but he's a player. And this is her. And her nickname was Party on Pat, Auntie P. She never had kids, never married, but she had always been a volunteer at a camp every summer. She loved dogs. She loved travel. She traveled all over the globe. And she and my aunt, her mother, Auntie Elaine, had an amazing life. As my aunt in her 90s started to get more and more sick, we all started to get a little more worried. And Pat was making some really crazy decisions. We just didn't understand some of the things like, buying a house and property down at, someplace down in San Antonio and just weird things, Padre Island, all these weird choices that she was making that really didn't seem consistent with good real estate. And we have lots of realtors in my family, good real estate kind of decisions. And we thought it was the stress of her being a caregiver for my aunt. And what we didn't realize is that those were actually her early symptoms of dementia. She was diagnosed with young onset Alzheimer's at age 57. Her symptoms started at age 56. She's my first degree cousin. I tell family members all the time, I might have 2 years left. So, and I'm not afraid to get it because if I do, just like Auntie P, I'm going to have a heck of a time. Unfortunately, COVID did get her, but she had an amazing life living with Alzheimer's, including the picture here on the bottom. She's at one of the mansions in Newport. She came up to live with us for a month, so to learn how to live with Alzheimer's. And all we did was really explore all the things that she wanted to do with the rest of her life and all of the ways that she has a good time. And one of the things that she and Richard Taylor and other folks have taught us is that when we use terms like they, we're othering them. And that is something that is, I think, something we're all much more aware of now. When we talk about the culture of dementia care, that's one of the things that we need to integrate in there is that whole concept of nothing about us without us, making sure that people living with the disease are recognized as the people experiencing the symptoms. Therefore, we should be connecting with them. And I think we all know this intuitively. You remember back in the 70s, some of you are too young, but back in the 70s, we used to whisper the word cancer. And people wouldn't talk about it. And we were all really afraid of it. And we used to have conversations like, should we even tell Graham that she has cancer? Can you imagine nowadays not telling someone that they have cancer? Of course, that's ridiculous. They need to be involved. They need to pick an oncologist. They need to choose which strategies for treatments they want. Do they want chemo, radiation, both surgery, non-surgery? Do they want more, alternative or complementary therapies? Whatever it is. Someday we are getting to the point, and we're getting there now at CaringKind very quickly. We spend a lot of time talking about this, making sure that we're asking people living with the symptoms what they want, how they want to treat that, what are they doing for informed decisions, because they are we. What do we want, right? They are realtors, they are subway operators, they are doctors and social workers and pastors and nurse aides and everybody else. They are we. So as one person said it, and I think it was in regards to mental illness, if you get stuck in the rain, you're out in the rain. Imagine you're in the rain. It's raining. You don't have an umbrella. You feel the rain, but you aren't the rain. You're in the rain, you feel it, but that's not who you are. So those are some of the concepts that we talk about when we're asking about who are our people living with dementia. I don't know if I'm gonna, I think I need
You want
someone
that
to
one?
forward. Okay. Oh, there we go. Yep. So who are they? They are activists. And all of these pictures in these next several slides are people who have lived with symptoms and most died from their Alzheimer's or related dementias. So they are activists, justices, politicians. Go ahead. They are musicians and lovers of music. Some of these things, as I was putting them together, didn't even realize, some of these folks had lived and died with Alzheimer's. Go ahead. They are artists. And the one in the upper left corner there, he did a self-portrait as his disease progressed. Really fascinating. Some of the expressive creations that artists are able to make. Go ahead. They are sports legends. I'm in Connecticut, and in Connecticut, we're all about college women's basketball. And the late, great college basketball from University, Lady Vols, the Tennessee Volunteers, Pat Summitt died with Alzheimer's young onset. Gordie Howe, I'm also a huge Whalers fan. And Brett Favre, whose name I can't pronounce. I had no idea, and he is an example of one of the many, many NFL football players and boxers who have had and developed what we call chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It used to be known as pugilistic dementia because so many boxers got it. And these are folks who are living normal lives, but their concussion history and their brain injuries have them developing dementia much, much later in the disease. I have a client here in Connecticut who's a former NFL Giants linebacker, and he has chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Go ahead. And of course, they are our entertainers. They are the people that we looked for laughter, for drama, for feeling all of the feelings that we feel through entertainment, through the movies, through television. Some of our people that we love the most in our society, the people like Robin Williams, who to me just has such a breadth and depth of skill and talent, or had, and Sean Connery, who I didn't even realize, again, until I was putting this all together, died during the COVID era. He didn't die from COVID, and I barely remembered that he had been diagnosed and died with cognitive impairment. Go ahead. So young onset, and these are people who we describe, it used to be called early onset, but everybody was getting confused between early onset and early stage. So we refer to it as young onset. And these are people whose symptoms started before age 65. They estimate that about 10% of the 6 million living with Alzheimer's have young onset. Also, about 60% of the 1 million living with frontotemporal dementia. Frontotemporal dementia is much more commonly diagnosed in people in their 50s. So those numbers are much higher. And 4% of the 1.5 million people living with Lewy body dementia. Go ahead. So it's different than early stage, which, like I said before, is any age. So the early stage is those initial symptoms. People may still be working, driving. They're responsible for their families. Some of them are still working. And really, when we see them in programs and services, or when you all see them in programs and services, that may be something they're really struggling with emotionally, because they may have had to give those things up, whether it's driving or retirement, unplanned. And usually they have insight that they're having a problem. Now, for some people, denial is their preferred coping strategy, and that's probably a lifelong pattern for them. So if they are in denial, they may know that they have some kind of a cognitive impairment or chronic cognitive changes, but they're either they are really afraid of that, or their denial is there because they need that there. I had a family member once tell me, you can't tell me my dad has dementia. I can't handle that right now. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. She's really able to define the fact that she needs her denial, that that denial is a coping strategy. In the early stages, they can still perform their ADLs independently and with good quality, and they can still perform familiar procedural based tasks like laundry, doing the dishes. I contend that even until the very, very late stages, people will still know how to drive a car. Driving is not a problem with dementia because they forget how to drive. It's the cognitive processes of everything else that's going on. So procedurally, how to drive, it's like how to play piano, right? We do it so much if we drive. And I know I'm talking to a New York-based crowd, and a lot of y'all don't drive at all, so that's okay. But for those of us who do drive, that's a procedural memory that is something that we do more often than doing laundry. I mean, I don't do laundry every day. I drive every day. So the how to physically drive doesn't change. It's the cognitive processes, the spatial orientation, the visual planning, the spatial orientation of where I'm going, that kind of mind mapping. Those things change. Go ahead. So, what do people need when they have mild cognitive impairment or early stage dementia? Number one is information and really time to process this. They need more frequent support. The worst thing that I hear from people all the time is, well, we went to the neurologist. He said that dad has dementia and he'll see us in a year. And they're like, what does that mean? And I always try to explain to them, here's where you need more support. Here's where you can get it. That doesn't mean that if there are changes, you should not go back. So, and that's something I have to tell everybody, whether it's Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, any kind of neuro degenerative condition, just because the doctor doesn't want to see you for a year doesn't mean that you shouldn't call them if you have a change. They need reassurance. First of all, that they don't have to tell everyone. A lot of people aren't yet comfortable with that. They're still making meaning of this in their own experience. So to just go out and tell everybody, hey, I've got this new diagnosis, it takes time, just like any other condition that we have. They need options for their care and treatment. Right now, there aren't a lot of good options, but they need to know what their options are so they can make an informed decision. And not just about their care and treatment, but also about their financial and legal options. They need support. They need people to talk to, not just us as healthcare professionals and supportive professionals, but they also need people to talk with who are going through the same experiences. And that's one of the programs we're going to talk about here in a minute. They need to be able to know why their family and their providers are taking things away from them. They really don't understand that because in their minds, they're still capable and confident. One of my clients that I'm working with right now was living out west, and her husband passed away a month before she moved to New York City. And the only reason that she moved is because she had recently been diagnosed and her husband died, and her daughter lives here in the city. And so her daughter is like, okay, well, we got to move you here so you can be closer to me. And it's like, wow, all of these huge changes all at once. I mean, we've got on the life stress scale, she's got them all. And so, yeah, she needs that support. She needs to understand. And now her daughter is very scared and wants to say, okay, well, don't go here and you can't do this and you can't do that. And she says, I feel like a prisoner in my apartment because she's afraid to leave. They also need to understand that there is no calendar, there is no crystal ball that says when they need to do something by. They keep saying, well, when am I going to be able to, or when won't I be able to do this? Or when, if I have to do this, what's the point that I have to make that choice? Or at what point should I move? And they need to be able to be flexible emotionally because this is difficult, obviously, but that they need to make new plans and create new routines now while they can. And that's something that I think a lot of us in the US tend to wait too long for things, because in the early stages they can still learn. I always say even in the later stages, I mean, how many of us have worked in nursing homes? Everybody in that nursing home on the dementia unit knows where their chair is in the dining room, and they know when someone else is sitting in it. So, and that's where we get those behaviors, right? That's new learning. So we know they can learn new things. It just takes a little bit longer. To understand that there's no crystal ball and that they can make choices now is very empowering, and they need that. Go ahead. Okay, so let me tell you about cognitive stimulation therapy. This is one of our early stage programs. It's really exciting. It's a lot of fun to facilitate. We have adapted the program that was developed in the UK. It's now offered several places around the globe. The groups that we consulted with while we were developing the program for CaringKind included the crew that originally developed it out in the UK, as well as places out in, I want to say the St. Louis area and all the way down in Australia. It's 16 sessions the way we run it. We're doing it virtually right now and have been for over a year. And we're now starting to plan our in-person groups again. It runs twice a week for an hour for 8 weeks. It's based on that research, like I said, so it is an evidence-based program. It has a standardized agenda with a theme song, a brief exercise, physical exercise. We do a cognitive warm-up, current events, an auditory challenge, and activity. And our goal here is not to use things like reminiscence, like a lot of other cognitive programs, or just to do like word games, but it's really about helping them create new neuronal connections. It's about new thoughts, new opinions, new ways of connecting thoughts in the world. And we really the research is supported in the past and is evidenced in our outcomes so far, improved self-esteem and sense of competence. Interestingly, the research showed no improvement in depression. Why? Because people weren't coming in depressed. The people who tend to sign up for a program like this aren't necessarily clinically depressed. So it wasn't that people were depressed and had no improvements, it's that they weren't depressed. One of the things, and I think Suzanne, if you click on the little icon there, we should be able to hear some examples. So, can you pause it, Suzanne? So I should have prefaced this. I forgot exactly how it started. One of the things that we do is an auditory cueing challenge. So and we do 3 every session. And so you have to listen to it and then you have to have them figure out and guess what it is. So the first one was already passed. So then this one is, go ahead, Suzanne. Okay, so any guesses as to what those sounds were? How about the first one? Does anybody have, you can probably just throw them in the chat or unmute yourselves. Someone said a subway door closing. So that is interesting because when we did that one with the folks, we had a real clear, distinct difference. In the current CST class I just completed last week, the folks in the city said the same thing. They thought that's what that was the subway door closing. And you're right, whoever said airplane signal, it's actually the airplane fasten your seatbelts sound. Okay, yes, the first one was a helicopter. The second one was actually a chipmunk. Not a lot of people realize that chipmunks make those funny little chirpy noises. Yes, elephant. Good job, Veronica. Fasten the seatbelts. Obviously, a baby laughing. And the last one was kind of a trick. I'm willing to bet no one knows what that was. If you Google talking plants, they just found out. So one of the things that we do for our current events, because I don't know about your impression, but in my estimation, the news nowadays is not really happy. And we really don't want to be like bumming people out. Yes, it's fine to have them give their opinions, but we do want to be careful not to trigger things for folks. So the current events that we tend to do tend to either be from things like goodnewsnetwork.org or .com, I don't remember, but the Good News Network, or other resources. And I found this really cool article about University of Tel Aviv actually has recorded noises that plants make when they are distressed. So you can imagine if, because you can watch that video and read that article. We always read an article in CST, the conversations that happen after that. And the funniest part of that conversation afterwards was they're all like, oh no, what are vegetarians going to do now? Because if these plants are actually making sounds when they're in distress, and that last one was actually a grape plant that was dehydrated and it was making that clicking sound. They're like, okay, now what do we do? Now what do we do? And they said, oh, that'll be the next article title is Vegetarians Are Starving in Israel. So it was amazing to do the program. And it's incredible to watch the group come alive because in the first couple of sessions, they're looking for the right answers. And starting around week 3 or week 4, depending on how the group coalesces, all of a sudden you start to see their minds fully engage. And it's so magical as a facilitator to actually get to see them wake up. It's like that Robin Williams and Robert De Niro movie, The Awakenings or Awakenings. They really do come alive. And it's so cool to watch and to be a part of. Go ahead, Susanne. All right, so the other program that I was going to share today is Journey Together. This is a 10-week weekly sessions, and it's all for people with the early stage cognitive impairment. It's based on the work of Ed Shaw and his colleagues down at Wake Forest. And the research really showed quite a bit of positive engagement and making meaning of this diagnosis. And it is I don't want to say it's prescriptive, but there is an agenda that we follow every week. And that includes things like meditation and mindfulness. Again, we do some physical warm ups. Telling their story is very much a part of it. And it kind of changes as we go through the sessions. In the last session, we retell their story. But it's really about learning what's going on in their brains. It was fascinating. It never even occurred to me the first time we did Journey Together. And I said, okay, it's week 3, we're going to learn about the brain. I said, do you know what's going on in your brains? And none of them did. They all were told, stay off the internet, don't research anything, you'll get too depressed. And so then they were given this information that they've got this cognitive impairment and what it means. But they, that whole session that Susanne just did for all of you, they had no idea what was going on in their brains. So we spent time talking about that. And we spent time learning about how that all works and what they can do to fight back. I can't imagine anything worse than being given a pill and saying, okay, you've got this terrible condition. Here's a pill. Take this every day. Go home and wait to get worse. There's got to be something else. There's got to be some other way that they can fight back. They also talk about their changes that they're experiencing. We explore ways to stay connected through the 5 love languages, process grief and loss, and some of those existential questions, the why me's, the what does this all mean? What does it mean for my family? And those kinds of questions about legacy. And it's, again, a wonderful program. I love facilitating it. Go ahead, Susanne.
Thank you, Pam.
All right, thank you.
And now we are going to hand the mic over to Marcia, who is the director of our Memory Advocate Peers program.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? Yeah, okay, perfect. I don't know, for whatever reason, it was on a delay earlier today when I was taking myself off mute. Thank you so much, Pam, for that lovely presentation, and Suzanne. And thank you, everyone, for having us here this morning. It's super exciting to be here and to be able to speak to you today. I'll be speaking to you about the Memory Advocate Peers program, which is a pilot program here in New York City in CaringKind. It launched just under a year ago, actually, yeah, about 11 months ago. So we're kind of in our infancy still. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, MAP is a support program, and it's providing support to persons that are recently diagnosed. It basically is, the focus is to connect recently diagnosed persons with dementia, with MCI, mild cognitive impairment, or an early dementia, and their care partners to a mentor. They provide support to this client, to the person with the diagnosis, for 12 months. Meaning the mentors, the mentors will be providing emotional support in a sense of care, empathy, validation, and they'll be, actively listening to this person that has been recently diagnosed to help them kind of not feel alone. They will also be providing them and linking them to, community resources, supportive resources, and also beginning the conversation if they don't know it already or if they're not familiar with clinical trials. So beginning to kind of have those conversations with them about what clinical trials are, where to find them, where to seek them out, and what it looks like when one enrolls. Next slide, please. So with MAP, it's kind of like a two-prong. There's 2 components to participation in MAP. I'm gonna kind of start out actually with number 2, where it says mentor. So a mentor at CaringKind, for the MAP program is a volunteer. This volunteer is actually a former care partner to somebody that they cared for. So somebody that whether it was their parent or their spouse, they have already provided, loving care to the person with dementia, and they've along the way learned a lot of, skills. We don't often think that we embark on this journey to learn. And, we do it out of our responsibility, out of our love, out of our compassion. And before you know it, we walk away, with a PhD in the care that we never thought we were ever going to be able to provide. And that comes through love and compassion oftentimes. But this mentor is, as I mentioned, is a volunteer. They're no longer an active caring, partner. They've had enough time to process their own, loss. We want to make sure that they don't feel that they haven't, gotten through that grief, that they've, understood what their journey, was about when they were providing care to their loved one. And they often, come back and say, we want to give back. We want to be able to, kind of give somebody else some of those lessons that we didn't know at the time that we were going through it. So they provide that, you know, emotional support. They provide that, you know, you're not alone feeling. You know, there are services available to you, whether you know, may know about them or not. And let me tell you a little bit about them. The volunteer is also receiving training. You know, once they're recruited, they are trained by CaringKind before they get paired to a dyad, meaning the two persons. And I'll speak to you a little bit about that momentarily. Let's move over to kind of like the first one over here on the left of your screen, hopefully. The client and the support partner. So it's, again, that's kind of like the two-prong or two components, one being the mentor and the other being the person you know, living with the disease and their care partner. You know, the client is a person living with dementia, and that's the focal point of the program. We want to provide, you know, attention and focus and you know, the service to the client, to the person with the diagnosis. The reason why, you know, is, as Pam was saying earlier, you know, we often have provided, there's many services available to care partners, to caregivers, you know, because of the care that they also, that the responsibility that they take on. And oftentimes we, you know, inadvertently begin to, you know, kind of speak about the person with dementia as if they're not there. We don't listen to them about what their needs and desires are, what their wishes are at any stage. But specifically at an early stage, we want to make sure that this person can tell us how they're feeling, how the diagnosis even, you know, what that felt like to hear that, how that's going to impact the rest of, you know, their week, their month, their years. How are they feeling? What do they want? You know, we often begin to, you know, it's often said, you know, when you speak about somebody with dementia, they say, oh, it's like taking care of a child, you know, and to some degree, I can understand where that comes from. But, you know, on the other hand, we want to make sure that that's not what we're actually thinking or saying. You know, they're not a child. This is, you know, a person with dignity that has, you know, if it's a parent and an adult child that, you know, come to us, you know, the adult child being the care partner, you know, that adult, you know, parent or that parent has raised this adult child, has, you know, probably lived in many different, you know, parts of the world, has maybe, you know, many languages under their belt, quite possibly has, you know, many very high degrees or not, but the purpose of what I'm saying is we have to try to remember that when we speak to these individuals, they are people that deserve the dignity and the respect that, you know, we can ask them, how does this make you feel, this diagnosis? Sure, this is devastating. What can we do now? How do we begin to plan? Not how am I going to plan for you? You know, if the person is at an early stage, we want to be able to hear them out and understand what their wishes are going forward, and even understand their fears, their angst, and everything else that comes along with it. So, you know, again, just to kind of describe what, you know, who is the client? The client is a person, of course, yes, living with dementia. It's a recently diagnosed person with MCI, mild cognitive impairment, or early stage Alzheimer's or other dementia. And again, the support partner, care partner, is the person that provides care to the person with the diagnosis. And that could be, you know, anyone. That could be, like I said, an adult child, a spouse, a partner, a sibling, a close neighbor, a very, you know, intimate friend that you've had for all your life. So somebody that is aware of, you know, the person with the diagnosis is life, what they're going through, how they normally go about their day, and somebody that's also wanting and willing to participate in the program for 12 months. Next slide, please. So this slide actually is a video of our founders are Jim and Geraldine Taylor. They're a couple. And Sarah, who is the third founder, is not in the video. But the founders are Jim and Geraldine, who are a couple who were married for many years, have kids of their own, and about 11, 12 years ago, so Geraldine, came to discover that she had, she was diagnosed with MCI. She was, prior to the diagnosis, an executive in a medical facility here in New York. And she kind of knew that, the symptoms that she was experiencing, were probably going to lead to a diagnosis of MCI or dementia. And, the reason, why this program came about, this pilot program came about, is because of the difficulty that Jim and Jerry had, after the diagnosis came in. They pretty much distanced themselves from one another. They didn't know how to deal with this diagnosis. There was fear in Jim's part, and there was acceptance in Jerry's part, and they didn't know how to meet in the middle. They didn't know how to speak to their kids about the diagnosis. Jim wasn't ready to do it, and Jerry wanted to let everyone know. They were at different pages of the same beautiful, love story that they share, and they just weren't around, the right services, immediately afterwards to understand then that it's okay and normal to go through this. And they came about to CaringKind, just after the diagnosis, and started receiving early stage services. And they started noticing that, well, this isn't the end, this is just a different beginning. And at that point, they, in the meantime, to kind of fast forward it, in the meantime, they've actually become national advocates. And if you Google Jim and Jerry Taylor, you'll actually see a wonderful, extensive, but wonderful article in the New York Times that they wrote back in 2012, 2014, something like that. And they'll tell you a little bit about how that, what that looked like for them when they first received that diagnosis and how difficult it was. So again, the reason why Jim and Jerry felt like we need to create something that is going to fill that void from when you come out of a doctor's office and you just don't know where to go, who to turn to, how to feel. And so MAP came about. I think, Susanne, if you can go ahead and actually play the video.
I'm Jerry, and I am living with Alzheimer's.
Jerry was diagnosed about 10 years ago now, and in that time we have been very active advocates for people living with Alzheimer's. We materialized the idea, and that was the need for a support organization we now call Memory Advocate Peers, or MAP. And incredibly fortunate we have been to find a development partner in CaringKind in New York City to support 50 people who've been newly diagnosed and their support partners.
The program will be pairing recently diagnosed persons with dementia and their support partners, their caregivers, with a former caregiver in order to provide them guidance into what their journey is going to be like.
So the idea is to bring someone to support you who's actually walked this path. We will bring information about living well with Alzheimer's, information about the disease, and information that will hopefully inspire them to participate in clinical trials and help find a cure.
The idea is to have them build their circle so that on a long-term basis, they'll have a strong tribe to lean on for the rest of their caregiving journey.
Our hopes for the people with the disease and their care partners is that they can live a better life. Our hope also is for the mentors to feel that the difficulties they went through in supporting a loved one with Alzheimer's can now empower them.
By becoming a volunteer, I feel that I found my life more meaningful, helping others to do their jobs. A confident caregiver will benefit dementia patients ultimately. We all caregivers suffer a lot United we stand.
I am a former caregiver. When my mother began to show symptoms of Alzheimer's, we were very scared and we were a lot in denial. I would have loved to have had somebody there to help guide my sisters and myself, along with my mom. It didn't have to be so scary.
I learned how to help my mentees and fighting the battle with them and easing their stress on the journey of caregiving.
You want a person who encourages you to live fully with this disease, to live well, to live purposefully, to live joyfully.
Anybody having Alzheimer's and other diseases, it's very important to keep yourself happy and working out how to live in this space.
Thank you. Actually, yeah, thank you. You could just go to the next slide, Suzanne. Thank you. So yeah, as you saw in the video, that's Jerry and Jim, and there are not just my bosses, but my inspiration. They're really a moving couple, and when you hear them speak, I think you too will kind of understand the drive that they have to make sure that the persons living with dementia are being heard and listened to, and that we can go ahead and make this an easier caregiving journey. It doesn't have to be that hard. It is, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. We just have to kind of work around it. So, excuse me. For the client and the care partner, we expect that some of the benefits can be that, of course, that they're heard and supported by a mentor with lived experience. The mentor knows how to validate, they can actively listen, they provide empathy. They'll learn about education opportunities and trusted resources. In general, what does that necessarily mean? We will be able to have the mentors connect them to services, whether it's through us, CaringKind, or through Alzheimer's Association, or so many other, agencies and organizations that can provide them services throughout their, caregiving journey for the care partner, of course, and that they can actually, not just be able to benefit by being able to receive these services, but also meeting others that are going through that by joining support groups, by being able to facilitate things that will come down the pike, because we know they will, like legal and financial issues, understanding that a power of attorney is so necessary and that it needs to be put into place, a healthcare proxy, understanding that if they're, as the mentor will help them plan long-term, the need for a home health aide might come into play. And what does that look like? And will Medicaid be needed? Or, looking at those different areas. And the mentor's not necessarily, again, the educator, the one that's going to provide this information, but they're the link, they're the liaison, they're the one that's going to help them, reach this resource much more easily. And by that, it could very well be, so many of you, I've seen in the chat, so many of you have so many expertise and you work for so many different areas that it could very well be that they will be reaching out to, to any of the services that you're providing, because that's what this particular dyad, this, this group of two people will be needing. We have, other services here, of course, through our social work department, like I said before, support groups. We also have a connected culture program. I think the ones of you that were attending yesterday probably heard about it. But it also, helps them to, know that they can be, socially busy. They can attend cultural programs at the museums here in New York if they can, in person. They can attend many programs virtually. The crazy silver lining of COVID, that is now, a big thing for us. But they can attend, music programs, art programs. They can even actually, some of these museums do provide these, tours virtually. They can attend botanical garden walks virtually as well, and as well as, in person. So this connected culture program is really especially amazing for persons, all persons, with the diagnosis, but in the early stages, it's really, kind of life-changing. They know that they can actually, continue to be a part of society, as sometimes, unfortunately, they are felt that they are now being kind of pushed off to the side. And of course, some of the programs that, have been mentioned earlier, but especially like the cognitive stimulation program, Journey Together. There was another program that, Pam facilitated, I believe, as well, which is To Whom I May Concern. And that is something that, they just had a presentation, or I hate to call it actually a presentation, but it was just more a gathering of persons, living with the disease. They just had this past week here. And they speak almost, I guess, and probably Pam could describe this better than I can, but more in a stage, in a theatrical kind of a manner, about what it's like to live with their disease. And I mean, this was so, everyone I think in the room had goosebumps. There were tears in their eyes. It's just so palpable how intense it is when they share their experiences. So, again, these dyads in the MAP program will be able to hear about all these programs through that mentor, and the mentor will help kind of guide them, because we have to remember these are persons that are just been diagnosed, and they may feel like, is this the end of my life? What's going on? What's happening? And that's far from it. I mean, yes, we are very real. They know what's happening, but there's a lot in between. And so to be able to, access and support and build a network, that's what that is. And it's also to in building that network, that extended network, means that they're going to also, the mentors are also going to help kind of decipher from their existing family members, from their circle of friends, from their, medical connections, who, putting the right people in place that are going to be there for the long term. And they'll also discover new strategies to live purposely. That's understanding that the quality of life, based on what I've just been saying, doesn't end there, that it's just a little bit of a different, kind of a route, but it's still available to them. They'll gain assistance, and, with research and participation, I've mentioned to you before that with clinical trials, they'll be able to understand through meeting with a clinical research mentor that, what clinical trials are. They'll understand that, if they're interested after they learn about it, they can be accompanied to go to enroll in some of these clinical trials. And that's through the clinical research mentor. Some of the outcomes that we feel that, clients and care partners might receive are to, of course, increase their social independence, the quality of life, to, that they'll be impacting by taking part in research, and they'll hopefully, yes, increase their sense of community resources by the, consistent conversations that they'll be having with the mentor. For the mentor, we feel that there are, many benefits as well. This is a volunteer. Again, this is somebody that has come to us to say they want to give back. They'll be hopefully feeling that they have a greater sense of meaning and purpose. Often we know that caregivers are overburdened. They feel the responsibility weighing down on them. And, after they've gone through this process of caring for their own loved ones, they sometimes walk away with regret. Had I been able to, I wish I could have, done this with mom or with my husband. I didn't think of doing that. And now they've had enough time to process that and understand, It's okay. We did everything we could when we could at the time that we could. And now with some of these additional, kind of skills that we walk away with, they can now provide that to their dyad, to the person that they're, to the two people that they're mentoring, so that they feel that, if there was any doubt in their mind, that there was any fear of, I didn't get to do this with my loved one. They're now doing it with this dyad. And believe you me, I have a lot of mentors that tell me that they have such amazing experiences, providing this emotional support for their dyad. Again, ability to use lived experience to support others. A sense of connectedness. Obviously, they are connecting in a different level, but still, feeling that they can provide these, skills and abilities to others, so that they're not feeling, scared or, alone in not knowing where to turn. Next slide. Thank you. So who is appropriate for a referral to MAP? Again, we want to kind of make sure for MAP, there's, I think, programs at CaringKind for, just about every stage for both the person with dementia and the care partner. But for MAP particularly, it's clients with a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment or an early to early mid-stage dementia. We want them to be able to participate in give and take conversations and be able to participate in telephone and virtual or in-person meetings. We also want to make sure that the person can acknowledge the diagnosis. We don't necessarily need to have them speak about it, but they do need to be able to understand that there is this diagnosis that they are now living with. And of course, again, to have a care partner that's, actively caring for them, that's providing support and care, and that can commit to the 12 months of the program. Next slide, please. Thank you. And just for referrals in general for MAP and or any other programs, I think that Erica has been kind enough to put that on the chat, I guess, a couple of times, which is this CaringKindNYC.org/CK-connection/ or just call in the helpline. The helpline is really your go-to for any, anything that you may, any question that you may have about CaringKind, about CST, about MAP, about, support groups. CaringKind, again, I think the go-to, even for professionals, if you have any question, if, when working with somebody with dementia, that should be your go-to is the helpline. It's a Monday through Friday, 9 to 4, I believe. Susanne can probably help me on that one.
9 to 5.
But not 9 to 5, sorry. But in general for MAP, just so that when it comes to referrals, we do accept people from out of state. There is the possibility, this doesn't necessarily, I know I've mentioned in person a couple of times, but it can very well be provided solely virtually, as most other programs have. Let me just see if I have, and probably didn't really look at my notes like I needed to. And if I've forgotten anything, obviously you have our contact information. I think that comes up in the next slide. Otherwise, I know that just the helpline or the CaringKind connection referral form. Thank you very much to everybody that has been here today, that has maybe come again since yesterday. I guess we're open for questions. Or
we are. Thank you, Marcia. I'm going to leave that there for a few minutes. It was also in our chat, and I'm going to stop sharing in a few seconds and go to the chat to see if there are any questions that we can answer. We have some time left. I know that Angelique will be sharing our contact information, so you're always welcome to email us directly. But like Marcia said, the best way to make a referral is to call the helpline or to use the connection form that is on our website. I also want to mention that most of our programs are offered in English, in Spanish, and in Chinese. So if any of your clients are bilingual in any way or feel more comfortable in one of those languages, one of our social workers will be able to help with that. I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's anything in the chat that we haven't answered, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask.
I know that many people here worked in different organizations, one that serve elders or any individual that are working with families. So even if you don't work with anyone that's 60 and over and you work with families, it's so important to think of them as a potential referral because you're also referring the caretaker. You're also listening to your clients, your patients, and they're telling you their whole life experience. We're thinking about narrative medicine, right? And how you're capturing all the information of your clients, of your patients in a holistic way. And if you're hearing that they're caring for someone that has memory loss, that could be a potential resource for them. So it's so important to kind of think of it in a very wide range. It's not just for the individual that is 60 and over, but it's for the person that is living with them, that is caring for them, that may not be living with them, and that is working with them specifically. Does anyone have questions? I'm sure that there can be some questions that can be answered by this amazing group. Have you found it difficult to have a conversation with someone that is experiencing memory loss? And have you found it difficult of them receiving information related to the biases that they're experiencing as social workers? Elaine, I see you nodding your head. Feel free to chime in.
Absolutely. I've had this conversation yesterday with a patient who's early onset Alzheimer's disease, and she's angry about it and struggling. And I found, I was offering resources, and she was, saying, well, how's that going to help me? So it's right. So I think she's going to come in to meet with me. And so I think it's about developing a rapport and a trust,
Yes.
and then being able to introduce some other options.
That's so right.
I also happen to think that, Elaine, based on what you're saying, there's a time that, they may not be ready for it, and there'll come the time when they might be ready, and it's just, they have to process those emotions right now.
Understood.
And also just being able to have an opportunity to talk to other people who are in the same boat that person's in. That we have, I have 7, I think right now, young onset folks who are in the same boat, that they've got a diagnosis and, they want to talk to other people. They want to have an opportunity to say, that's not fair. This sucks. Yeah, you're right. This is terrible. And we're going to survive the best we can.
That's right. That's right.
So I see one question in the chat. Will the PowerPoints be shared? Yes, they will. I will share with Angelique, and she will be sending them to all of you that participated today. I also wanted to mention that for those of you that work in community organizations or anywhere else, any of our social workers are very happy to come out and do a presentation on understanding dementia or any other program that we are running that you would like for us to talk about. So if you're interested in any of that for your staff, for your social workers, we are happy to show up and provide some education.
I know that there's a lot of community events that are happening in spring. So if you know of any community events, that would be wonderful as well. Jordan, thanks for coming. I know that you work closely with Mark Goodman. He's a social worker that I've known for over 10 years. We used to do Make-A-Wish, grant wishes together, and now he's doing this incredible work. Let us know if there's anything we can do to support you and Mark, Jordan, as well. Do you also provide presentations for clients? Oh, go ahead, Jordan.
I apologize. I was just thanking you.
No, you're welcome. Can you tell us a little bit how you work together and what you do?
Well, elder planning, wills, estates, guardianships, power of attorney forms, living wills, and of course, a lot of it relates to I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words.
Oh, that's okay. No, I think we got the gist of it. That's incredible work that you do. I know CaringKind has mentors. The MAP program really supports in making sure that they understand all these resources. Marcia is a great contact. You should definitely stay connected. And I think there was another question. Do you also provide presentations for clients? Veronica asked.
We can.
And I want to say that we also run a program that we didn't talk about today that's called Life Pathway, because it is very, very important when somebody receives a diagnosis to be an advocate for yourself and to start thinking a little bit ahead of all of the things that you need to take care of. And Life Pathway in particular, specifically, is designed for people that do not necessarily have a designated caregiver. And so our social workers will help them go through all of the things that Jordan just mentioned, you know, to get their affairs in order and to help them start planning for the future as the disease progresses.
Amazing.
If
Thank
I
you
may
so much.
add, sorry, if I may add, I don't think I actually made a little plug for my mentors when it comes to, I am open to receiving also referrals of former caregivers. So if you happen to have come across at any time in your work that you know that somebody has gone through that journey and wants to give back, we're open to receiving that information as well. And thank you in anticipation.
And I want to say thank you to Angelique for hosting CaringKind.
Absolutely. Thank you for the all the organization that you put into this, Angelique. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you for the work you do, everyone.
So any other questions today before we continue with our days, with our busy days? As we said, you know, we will be sharing everything with you, so you have our contact information, and please feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to CaringKind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.